I am here with Jim Pugh, who I go back many, many years with. I want to say probably 43 years, I think.
Jesus.
Something like that.
I think it would probably be. It's
Probably
be longer
time
than that, but we wouldn't want to talk about it.
Right.
But anyway, yeah.
Well, definitely back to 1980.
Okay.
Yeah. But anyway, Jim is a amazing keyboardist. He also has a recording company that is a non-profit called Little Village Foundation.
Actually, the record label is called Little Village, and the foundation, the non-profit part, the business part it's complicated, is Little Village Foundation.
It is called that?
The foundation is, but the record company, we dropped foundation.
Oh, okay.
So
all
it's
right.
just...
So it's Little Village Foundation.
Yes, or Little Village Motherfucker, as some people.
Right. Well, that would be from Chess Records.
Thank you very much.
The Chess Records version.
Yes, we all have that.
Yeah.
Yes.
But anyway, Jim has been doing this a long, long while. And you're from Winnetka?
Thank you. Yes. I am,
outside of Chicago, the north suburbs, right?
North Shore.
North Shore.
Right next to Glencoe, which is where Mike Bloomfield is.
Right. That's what I kind of thought. I had a feeling you grew up near where Bloomfield grew up. Yeah.
Actually, I have an interesting...
So you were kind of the second generation after Bloomfield of
we were
players.
Way too precocious. That was part of the whole story. I say we because there was a bunch of us. You want to know an interesting story? When I was a kid and I grew up in Winnetka, I grew up next to the train station.
I read that, yeah.
Northwestern train station. So I'm a kind of a train nut.
Right.
But at one point, I remember walking when I was like must have been 5 or 6 years old, walking to the beach and standing at the corner of Tower Road and Sheridan Road in Winnetka. It was like a Sunday afternoon, the summertime, but about 2 o'clock, 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And a whole parade of Cadillacs, brand new Cadillacs, with black people in them, all dressed up, drove by. And I remember going, because there weren't any black people at that time in Winnetka. Right. And even as a little kid, I just went, wow, what is that? And about 3 or 4 years ago, well, it's probably more like 10 now, Richard Cousins gave me a book about the Chess Brothers. And it said that Howlin' Wolf and Muddy Waters and everybody used to drive on Sundays. They would drive up Sheridan Road.
For parties.
And go to a barbecue at Leonard Chess's backyard.
So what town was Chess in?
Glencoe.
He was?
Yeah, he was too.
All right.
Isn't that weird?
That is
because I was a little kid, I'm sitting there going,
and how did Richard Cousins know that?
No, because it was I was saying he gave me a book.
Oh, I see.
You might
in the
have
book.
seen there's some kind of like rebop book.
There is a book,
about the chess
golden something.
Right, that's it.
Yeah,
so anyway, it's got this whole story. I don't know if that's a place to start, but that was pretty. It had an impact, and
in a lot of ways, though, I kind of think of that. You and Peter Damon and a lot of your friends, just a lot of the guys our age, kind of were doing a similar thing to what Bloomfield and them were doing, but they had done it first.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, I think Peter has a sister who, one of his sisters was like 10. We were all, me and Peter and a bunch of our friends, we were all like the youngest kids in our family. We were the youngest. I'm the youngest one. I got 4 brothers and sisters. Well, his oldest sister was going to the University of Chicago, and she had, because it was the blues scare, because we were way too young. I mean, I was listening to this stuff when I was like 12 and 13 years old and smoking cigarettes and trying to dress like the cover of the Butterfield record. Right. Yeah. We'd stand there. And that's part of the reason why years later when I work with Elvin, and even to this day, I get very nervous.
Can't get comfortable, yeah.
Well, I finally have.
No, I know what you mean.
It took forever because
I know what you mean.
It was such an idolizing kind of thing.
Yeah. Those guys had a really gigantic legacy.
Well, especially, I think I found, for years later working with Kahatsa and people like that they didn't so much on the West Coast. Maybe they did on the West Coast, but really in Winnetka, in Chicago and in that part of the North Shore, it was huge. It was
huge in San Francisco too.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Was it big in Glendale? Where are you from?
Well, I'm from L.A.
Well, I know.
It wasn't big in L.A. like it was in San Francisco.
You know,
San Francisco, they blew the scene open when that came out.
Who was I talking to recently that talked about going, that was kind of the same version of that, but in L.A. God damn it.
Well, they played the Golden Bear when they played in L.A.
No, but I mean in terms of the blues scene and oh shit, I can't remember. Cut it out. Anyway,
yeah.
go ahead.
Well, the blues scene was much different in L.A. That's why I ended up in the Bay Area, was because the blues scene was much more wide open with Bill Graham and all the expats that moved from Chicago.
They all moved out there.
Yeah. You know, Musselwhite, Bloomfield, John Lee Hooker, you know, Luther Tucker, Francis Clay, all these guys moved to the Bay and kind of made it more of a scene in a way, you know.
I assume they all moved out there because of the hippie scene,
yeah,
of the music scene, because of that.
Gravenitis, yeah.
Gravenitis. Have you ever read his the excerpt of what his autobiography is?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I just sort of discovered. Well, anyway, I was talking about Peter Damon's sister. She had all the records, and we started, and somehow from that, and this is like, we were like, what year did Resurrection of Pig Boy Crabshaw come out?
That's probably 68, 67, 68.
I think it's got to have been 67.
Yeah.
That was one of the first records. And around that time that I got that, then I got Chicago Blues Today, which came out in 65.
Yeah.
And those were the records to me. And then there was like Live at the Regal.
Right.
And that was kind of,
all
and that's the was for everybody. And It's My Life, Baby, that Junior Wells.
That's the same time.
And then later on, Left My Blues in San Francisco, which actually was a horrible name for a record. But that's a great record.
Yeah, that's a great record. And then there's the one that Tim played on too, Tim Kahatsu.
I wasn't that
played on the live one.
Right. Was that on our Hulu or was that on Chess?
That was on Vanguard, and it was recorded in Berkeley.
Right, with the New Orleans house, right?
Yeah.
No, that was kind of, well, Kahatsu was a whole nother
thing. Yeah.
You should interview him.
Well, that'd be hard. When I get into Resurrections, I will.
You could do it.
When I get into Resurrections, I will. But, the interesting thing is we both know all these same people from that time period, and I think, you came into the blues thing. I remember I met you at Major Ponds at one point.
I lived next door. They used to hand me drinks over the fence.
And I remember you told me you played with, was it Rubicon that became like...
Yeah, they became Night Ranger.
Night Ranger, that's what it was. Yeah, I always remember that.
I played I really, because a keyboard player and as a musician, I really liked, when I came, when I came to California and I came to San Francisco, people took me around to hear music and I went, I don't like any of this. And then someone took me to the Keystone Berkeley to see Tower. And there was like Hell's Angels and Black Panthers and La Raza, and I went, well, this is cool. I like this.
So the East Bay had a good,
was really sort of
it had a good scene.
Although I have, and it kind of is relevant now, but I sort of, from working with Jerry Martini in that band Rubicon, I really learned. I was a huge Sly fan, and I kind of got to know from a peripheral thing in my early 20s all these people that were in that scene, and there is this sort of very subliminal and kind of unknown thing of San Francisco funk, which, as opposed to the East, in terms of Oakland kind of Tower kind of.
Right.
So that was part of the reason I stayed, was because of Tower. And so I was sort of off into that, but I also would I played blues. It was interesting because to this day, I don't profess to be a particularly good musician, although I like the way I play my version of Otis Spann as much as, there are people that play it better than I think, but not many. I could do that. It was something that I just kind of taught myself. I'm not an expert at it, but I like the way that I do it. So but at the same time that I was playing on American Bandstand and doing all those other things with Rubicon, I played on the Midnight Special.
Wow.
I'm not that, I was young for doing that too. But I also could go around to places like Dottie's and I could play. I knew sort of the stuff that they did.
Yeah. And And you said when you played at Dottie's, like there was they had a B3 already there.
Yeah, and I also at the same time I started playing what I call Mexican music, which was ranchera, kind of Little Joe and La Familia,
right?
To make money, and also I had a lot of friends that did it. So I had this sort of, I just really, when I went to University of Pacific for about, I don't know, a cup of coffee for about 3 or 4 months.
That's
and then
in Stockton?
Yeah, and then I dropped out and moved in with some people that I knew in the Fillmore district and really started to sort of, my parents had said something like, okay, but when you run out of money, you can come home and we'll talk about what you're going to do next.
Right.
And I never went home.
I'm just curious, did you know Chris Isaak when he was going there?
No.
Because he went there too.
No, yeah, he did. And although we both knew, well, he's from Stockton, and I think
okay.
He I'm not sure that he was actually he was a day student or whatever they call it because he lived with his parents. But we knew the same football players. There was Willie Viney and Willard Harrell, and he knew these guys, and I sort of knew them. Well, we talked about it years later.
Right.
Isaac's really smart. A lot of these guys are really smart.
That's what I've found.
No, they're really smart.
No, that's what I found doing these interviews.
Steve Miller is really smart.
Sure is.
And Elvin is like ridiculous. Elvin's teaches
like a
himself
genius, yeah.
Japanese.
Yeah. And really is, yeah.
Huey is really smart. Huey Lewis. There are other people that
Gravenitis.
I bet.
He is. Musselwhite.
Yeah, well, I mean, but people that are academically really, I mean, I have a feeling that one of the things is to be successful, because people ask me, well, how do you be successful? Not that I am, but I said, if you want to be successful in the music business, go to school and write papers, because that's what these people can do. I mean, not that they write papers, but they write songs and they know how to go from the beginning, middle, and end, and I had to sort of figure that out.
Steve Miller is like astounding how smart he is.
Right.
I mean, with recording and things like that, just that whole thing of people that can put everything together.
He's very, Boz Skaggs is really smart.
Yeah.
And really detail oriented. I'm more I'm painting outside the numbers. And I do the same thing with Little Village. I kind of like the minutia of things is something I've had to learn how to handle at an old age. I mean, it's a little late in the game, but I'm doing it.
Yeah. And I mean, you do have quite a wide interest in musically. I mean, you've been in R&B. You've been with Etta. That's Stone R&B. Robert Cray, which I guess you would say was, blues oriented. Would you call it blues oriented R&B or pop? What would you call it?
I don't know what you call Robert. I mean, it's singer songwriter, and I mean, I think if he wasn't black, he'd probably be considered like Elvis Costello. But people kind of, because he plays guitar, I mean, that sounds like it's a fucked up thing to say, but it's true that his singing and his songwriting alone is unique. I've seen him. I have a tremendous amount of respect for. He's another person who is, and it's not like Steve Miller smart, I suppose. But he's somebody that could sit there for 5 minutes and write a song that I couldn't write in 50 years. It just comes out of him, and it's brilliant.
You think that's just doing it all the time, or?
I think he's one of those people that's really gifted.
Yeah,
it's not a parlor trick. It's not some
right.
Some people, and we've mentioned that I've worked with. I think that. It's calculated. It's a thing. Like when I write songs, if I got a beginning and a middle, I can fill in the rest.
Right.
But there's some people that just kind of start and it comes out.
Yeah.
It's just like...
It's almost like a painting or something.
Yeah. And if you compliment him, especially Cray, if you tell Cray, man, I really like the way you did that, he'll never do it again. He doesn't repeat himself. It's just, and he gets a lot of shit, but from some people. And he really is, the coolest person I ever worked with, I guess.
Yeah, and you worked with him for 20 years?
Well, the way that I added up, it's about 24 years, and I call it 25 years. It's 24 years and 8 months or something like that.
Were you the longest member in that band besides Richard or Richard Cousins?
I think that I was in it, and this, you know, it doesn't make any difference. Richard, that band that was with Richard and those guys when it was a quartet, that was really the band, and everybody else, that doesn't make any difference. I did it longer than anybody.
Did you?
But, and I thought about that too, but except that maybe one of the sound guys has done it longer. But Richard obviously is the whole thing. I mean,
yeah,
he did it for Richard, 20 years, and then
and Richard and him were like teenagers together, right?
Yeah, and Bobby Murray, if you,
right.
you know, and that whole thing. No, they were, and one of them is sort of extrovert, and one of them is introverted. Guess, you know.
Yeah, that's kind of that. I'm starting to see that a lot with friendships where you know that happens, And then I was going to say, you know, in between, you've backed up so many different people. I remember you're on that Otis Rush tour in the, I want to say it was early 80s. Is that right? Yeah. And did the record that came out on Blind Pig. That's to me, a really great Otis Rush record.
It was, I've been told that it's his favorite record. It was his favorite record. You know, the really interesting thing to me is, you know, I spent a lot of time sort of not telling people where I was from for various reasons. It's different in California than it is in other parts of the country. But I didn't, and I actually hired Otis Rush when I was a freshman in high school.
I remember you told me that.
And it was incredible because...
What was it for, though?
Just a dance.
Really? It was just a dance?
Well, it got to be, and from that, well, you know, have you ever heard the story? I guess I've told it more than once about how I hired Coco Taylor.
Yeah, I read that in that. But see, you never told me that one. Yeah, you never told me that.
It didn't happen.
One you told me.
The part of the story I didn't tell you was, I don't know, this isn't linear. I don't know if you could use it. But what happened is that they had, when I was in high school, they said, well, you have to have an activity. And I went, oh, I don't want to do it. Well, I said, okay, I'll be on the dance committee. And it was somebody's mother and a couple of girls and me. And they said, well, who do you want to hire for to play the dance? I'm like, oh, I don't know. I buy records from Bob Kester at the Jazz Record Mart. Right. We call him. So I called him. He said, well, you know, Coco Taylor, what about that? And I went, oh, I just seen Peter and I had just seen her at the Chicago Blues Festival in '69. And I was like, wow, that'd be really cool. Well, then I'm sitting there and Bob Kester, it was a three-way call with Bob Kester, me, and Willie Dixon.
Wow.
And I guess I called her, as the story goes.
Right,
I called her.
In that article, she talks about that.
Yeah. And I talked to Willie, because Willie Dixon was managing Coco Taylor. So she came and played at the school. It was great and everything. And then, then about 20 years later, I'm playing at a blues festival in Santa Cruz. Right. With Robert, and there's all these guys that are kind of like blues authorities, Dick Waterman and Harry Duncan. Right. They're standing there and they're talking in the backstage, talking to this woman, and I come walking by, and Mike Kappa said, "Oh, you know, you have to meet Mrs. Dixon," and it was Willie's widow, and so Jim talked to Willie on the phone when he was 14 years old. Right. And I shook her hand, and I said, yeah, it was very nice. And right then, one of them, who I won't say, stepped right in front of me, like basically took his
I think I know who it was.
Went, oh, yeah, well, I don't want to talk about that. I'm going to talk about me and Junior Wells at Teresa's, and, you know, and I just went, at that point, the way people are, I just kind of went, okay. And I turned and walked away, and as I was walking away, they go, excuse me, and Jim, excuse me. And I remember I turned around, and the woman, Mrs. Dixon, had taken the guys and pushed him out of the way and said, I answered the phone that day.
Yeah, that's wild, yeah.
And she said...
That's pretty amazing.
She said, you know, he talked about that there was some white boy from the North Shore that called her up.
Yeah.
You know, the shit got
So he arranged it then for you?
Oh, yeah. He was the manager. I think he probably took 20%.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, well, and people
he pretty much discovered her.
people go, "Oh, Jim, that's the coolest thing in the world. That's so cool." I go, "It really wasn't that cool because at some point I had to turn the phone over to Eunice Jackson's mother." I go, "Here, talk money with." It was really dumb. It was way dumb, but anyway.
Now the other one I remember a long time ago. You told me you called up a bar in New Orleans to talk to Roosevelt Sykes.
That it wasn't I think it was the Court of Two Sisters, but I remember I did this thing for my 16th birthday. I told my parents, I said, because I had Blues Unlimited magazine. Mm-hmm. That magazine used to have the phone numbers of everything, right? And I said, I just want to call people on the phone. And I had the directory
great.
I had the directory for the Musicians Union in Chicago too. I think my brother had. So I called up Muddy Waters, and then I started looking through this. I called, and one of the places was.
So did you talk to Muddy?
Yeah, but I mean, what do you say?
I know.
You go, hi.
When you're that age,
you hang up the phone.
I met B.B. King, and I went up to B.B. King in this line, and he goes, "Hello?" I said, "Do you know Muddy Waters?" And he went, "Yes." He was waiting for me to say something about him, you know. It was embarrassing.
But anyway, so I think I called, I think it was, but people say it couldn't be, but I think I called the Court of Two Sisters on Bourbon Street. And you could hear piano on the right, and it was like a bartender going like, "Hello." And I go, "Can I speak to Roosevelt Sykes?" And it was in the, Blues Unlimited magazine that he was playing there. The British crazy. So you could hear him go, "Roosevelt, the phone's for you." And he comes, and I could go, "When are you coming to Chicago?" And he,
like, huh?
Totally.
No, that's great, though. I'm glad somebody else did it, too.
Oh, I did a lot of stupid shit like that.
Yeah, I did, too, man. Same here. Well, it's funny, man. I mean, getting into it as a teen, I think there's a certain commitment that it takes to get into it, like at that age.
Well, I guess. I mean, I look at it as being a passion. I mean,
yeah, I guess that's what I'm saying. Yeah.
And I didn't really realize the consequence of everything much at that point. It just was kind of like, I mean, I certainly didn't think one day
I'll be playing with these guys.
I'll be playing. Will be a pedigree, and I will have started before. I was here first.
That's the amazing thing about life, though, is that you idolize these guys when you're young, and the next thing you know, 20 years later, you're playing on stage with them. Well, and that's a super exciting.
That's it. But I certainly didn't consider. Well, I definitely wasn't intended. I mean, I'm supposed to have been riding the Northwestern train with a Brooks Brothers suit and a ham sandwich in my briefcase. This is not what are you doing?
Not what your parents ordered.
No, it's not at all.
What do your brothers do, by the way?
My brother, my one brother, I have one brother and two sisters. My older brother, he played music for years, and he actually, he's like Gravenites age. He was going and playing and recording on the South Side when he was in high school. He was doing it way early as well. And something, I'll tell you, my parents, I was the youngest one. By the time I was a freshman in high school, everybody else in my family was gone. So I'd sit there with my parents, and they weren't real happy people at this point. And my father goes, "Jim, I know you're going down there to the South Side and you're trying to sneak into places. And if you keep doing that, they're going to kill you. So knock that off." And my mother would sort of go, "Oh, Ezra, leave him alone. I did the same thing in high school." And she'd go, "Gene, God damn it, what?" Because he was from Texas and she was from Chicago. Yeah,
that's great. Did she go to the South Side?
Well, she had boyfriends and stuff and ran around and everything. Well, I mean, the whole thing of people, white people, and trying to embrace black culture is nothing new. And then and Papa said, he goes, and I know you're smoking marijuana, and this is like '69 or something.
Right.
Don't do that. And she goes, "I'll leave him alone. I didn't say it." She goes, "Who the fuck did I marry?"
Your mom saved the day.
Right.